to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Roy. You may all be seated. I'd like to thank Impact Employment Solutions and MRF as our meeting sponsor for this month. And at this time, I'd like to ask if there are any visiting Rotarians today? No? Does anyone have any guests that they would like to take up to the microphone and introduce?
Good afternoon. I don't know if the microphone is on, but I brought with me my colleague and friend, Chris Gilchrist, the Executive Director of the National Museum of the Great Lakes.
Hi everyone, I brought my friend Anna Snyder. She's a realtor with Serenity Realty.
I don't have a guest, but the mic is open, and I feel like a guest at these meetings right now. So I just wanted to say it's great to be back in the room. The support that myself and my family received from the community the last 2 months has been overwhelming. I made a comment to Travis earlier today that I didn't know you could even mail cards anymore. And yet I got cards from, I think every day I've gotten a card from a Rotarian. Folks that I know, folks that I don't know, folks that I like, folks that I don't like. But I loved every single one of them. So thank you. It meant the world to me and to my family. So it's good to be back, and thank you.
Glad to have you back, Kevin, and glad to have the guests with us today. At this time, I'd like to invite Dick Wolf and our newest member, Brian Reed, up to the microphone.
Thank you, President-elect Cindy. Fellow Rotarians and guests, I'm pleased to introduce our newest Toledo Rotary member, Brian Reed, Vice President of Client Development at Signature Bank, N.A. Pat Sheehan and I are proud to be Brian's sponsors. Brian grew up in the Columbus area and obtained his undergraduate degree in marketing from The Ohio State University and his MBA in finance from the University of Toledo. Brian started his work career with the Toledo Trust Company and has worked in banking for 33 years, serving in many different positions. Brian says the work he enjoys most is assisting small business owners with financing needs, cash flow management, and growth and succession plans. Brian's interests include reading, woodworking, and golf, and I've had the pleasure to play some golf with Brian. He and his wife, Erica, have 3 grown sons, each of whom have a strong desire to help others. Brian and Erica welcomed their first grandchild, Joanna May Reed, a couple of months ago, and Joanna broke a string of all boys on Brian's side of the family that goes back 7 generations. Brian credits his father as a role model for dedication and service. I've known and worked with Brian for many years, and I can tell you that his life and work practices embody service above self and the 4-way test. So he's been a Rotarian all his life without knowing it. Today we make Brian's status as a Rotarian official. Please join me in a warm Toledo welcome for Brian Reed.
Thank you, Dick, and Pat as well. I'll keep it short. I know some of you, but there's quite a few more of you I don't know, and I look forward to meeting you and getting to know you and getting plugged in wherever it makes the most sense, wherever I can help in Rotary. Thank you.
Welcome, Brian, and thank you, Dick. If Heather Carnes is in the room, if she could come up and make an announcement about the strategic plan for the University of Toledo.
Good afternoon, President-elect Cindy, Congressman Latta, fellow Rotarians and guests. I am here with a public service announcement for the University of Toledo. The university launched a new strategic planning process in November 2021, and the Strategic Planning Committee has scheduled meetings with stakeholders, including students, faculty, staff, alumni, employees, and the community. Members of the community are invited to join a University of Toledo Strategic Planning Town Hall this Thursday at 7 p.m. via WebEx, so it will be virtual. If you have thoughts to share about the university's outlook and plan going forward, please consider participating. Information to join can be found in the Spoke that was sent out last Thursday, and I'm hopeful it will be in this Thursday's Spoke as well. You can find additional information on the strategic planning process through the University of Toledo's website. And if you're not able to attend virtually but do have feedback that you want to share, there is an email address where you can submit your feedback. So thanks to all of the Rotarians who may take a few minutes to be part of that planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Lots of announcements today. So next, I'd like to invite Jack Hollister up to the podium to give us an update on the Working Better Together initiative.
Thank you, President-elect Cindy and fellow Rotarians. Today I'm standing before you as a representative of the Working Better Together, or WT Subcommittee, dedicated to working with fellow Rotarians to see people with outstanding talents and some type of disability find active employment within our community. The work of the committee is a result of the efforts of the Disability Services Committee and is an approved project of the Toledo Rotary Board. Briefly, I'd like to remind you of presentations made, they seem centuries ago, but they were in 2019 and 2020. And when four outstanding organizations, the Ability Center, the Epilepsy Center, Goodwill of Northwest Ohio, and Lot Industries joined together to make employment of people with disabilities a higher priority. Each of these organizations is represented in downtown Rotary by past or present leaders. The downtown Rotary has a long history of assisting people with disabilities, people who have, to this point, the right medical, educational, independent living resources to live a long and meaningful life. And now finding more traditional employment for this same group is the latest opportunity that we have as an organization. And quite frankly, it seems like the time is right, the time is now. It's my pleasure to lead the Employers Association with over 620 companies in Northwest Ohio, and we work in the employment space, and as I'm sure you're all aware, the need for and shortage of great talent in this region has been ongoing. And we are all, in some sense, experiencing this thing we're calling the Great Resignation. And so right now is a great time to look at alternatives in terms of finding talented and capable employees. So the way that this program will work from here as we go forward is that on a monthly basis, I believe the first meeting of the month, we will have the pleasure of introducing to you, and when I say we, one of the leaders of one of these organizations will have the pleasure of introducing to you a potential candidate. And so that is the way that we want to try to do this going forward so that you get an opportunity to see and experience these great folks. So Roy Cherry of the Epilepsy Center, David Tackett of Goodwill, Tim Menke of Lot Industries, and Lisa Brosecki of the Ability Center are the contact folks. You could go directly to them at any time. You don't have to wait until somebody comes to one of these meetings. Or quite frankly, if you want to contact me at the Employers Association, I can help make those introductions for you. So the goal for us and for you hopefully is clear, is to see persons with disabilities employed by Rotarians or friends of Rotarians in 2022 and in the years ahead. We just want to try to make this as easy as possible and open up new opportunities for all of you and for our candidates. Thank you.
look forward to meeting some of those candidates and getting the Rotary members more involved in this program. As you said, it's been in the works for a long time, and it's had a hard time getting off the ground, so thank you very much. At this time, I would like to say that the Rotary Club and the Board of Directors are looking for alternate venues to hold our Monday meetings. We had an ad hoc committee of Kevin Mullen, Travis Tangeman, and Steve Miller, who've been working diligently on this, and we have it narrowed down to at least a couple, one of which is possibly the Toledo-Lucas County Library. So we hope to do this within a short period of time, and there'll be more information to come as we narrow that down. But look for new meeting locations coming soon. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Bob Reichart, who will come up and introduce our special speaker today.
Thank you, Cindy. It gives me great pleasure to introduce a friend of mine for a long, long time, Bob Latta. I think most of you probably, hopefully, read the book and reviewed his background, the committees he serves on. He's been quite involved. I did a little research and found out, even though a lot of his critics say that he doesn't meet with anybody, he's had over 1,000 meetings with his voters over the last few years. His district is, I think, longer than Marcy's, the Snake on the Lake, isn't it? Yeah. But anyhow, Bob's from Bowling Green. He and Marcia and their 2 daughters live down there, and a good friend, and I don't want to take too much of his time. Bob, it's yours.
You know, I didn't have I got pretty good vision. Did I see that it says that you got 52 years of perfect attendance? Wow. First of all, you know, when they say in the United States that nobody gets along with anybody anymore, I'm just glad to know that Rotarians will actually have a Kiwani and speak to you. So, but I've been in our Kiwanis Club in Bowling Green, I think, for, oh my gosh, over 35 years. And I was president. I did our 501c3 for our scholarship fund years ago, and different things. But first of all, I want to thank all of you for being in Rotary. Because I just think of it this way. First of all, government can't do everything. And if it wasn't for you and what you do for your community, who would do it? So thank you very much, because it's a lot of time commitment and energy and money. But I really appreciate what you do, because again, as I go across my district and across the state, again, if it wasn't for folks in our service clubs, we wouldn't have the communities that we would have today. And but just think for a second of everything that you do and you work on, and what would happen if you weren't there. And then people would say, what happened? And it's just like, well, nobody stepped up. But as I look around the room, I see a lot of folks that have stepped up, so thanks very much. Well, it's been interesting. Before we get started on the redistricting thing, I have no idea where I'm even supposed to file my petition this year. Because normally it's your largest county, but the court threw out the redistricting plan, and our petitions are due the first week of March. So I've been out collecting signatures from about every county I can think that might be in the district, just to be on the safe side, and we'll go from there. But I really want to thank you for having me here. I've been blessed. This is I can't believe it now, my 32nd year of public service. And, I got my start here in Toledo. I practiced at Marshall Milhorn, and also was in the legal department at Toledo Trust years ago. I can't believe where those years have gone. But I've been blessed in my area for, as I said, for 32 years, because I've gotten to represent so many people across Northwest Ohio, North Central Ohio, and going into Northeast Ohio. And one of the things that tells me a lot is our community when I go around, and I go to a lot of meetings all the time. And I'm fortunate because I also serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee. The Energy and Commerce Committee, it has the most broad jurisdiction of any committee in the House or the Senate. So when it comes to energy, telecommunications, healthcare, digital commerce, environment, and we also have an oversight committee. We do everything. More bills normally come out of our committee that are signed into law than any other place in Congress. So I get to do a lot of different things and work on a lot of different things, but I serve right now as a ranking member on the telecommunications subcommittee, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But it's been fascinating because of all the things that we've had to do, not only in my district and in the country, that come up. And the other thing that's great about serving on the Energy and Commerce Committee is this, because we actually look over the horizon 5 to 10 years, because there's so much innovation that's going on out there that we've got to get it right. And so the laws that we pass have got to make sure that as the regulations come out that follow later, that we're not hindering innovation and those entrepreneurs. Because if we want the United States to lead, we've got to make sure we got the right laws on the books. And that's what we do every day, when, in my opinion, when we're in committee. We've got to make sure that we do it. It also kind of reminds me back when I was in high school in Bowling Green in driver's ed, back when they used to have driver's ed in high school, and our wrestling coach was our driver's ed teacher. And it's kind of like I tell people this in committee still. And I said, you know, it's just like the coach used to tell us, don't look at the end of the car, you already passed it. Look all the way down the road. And that's what we have to do. And so every day is a very interesting day. I always say that every day is a good day. Some days are better than others when you're in Washington. But it's been a very interesting time. And before I get into some of the other broader areas, let me just talk about what my district looks like. I have 86,000 manufacturing jobs. I have the largest farm income producing district in the state of Ohio. So if you think of anything that can be made, my district is almost like a microcosm of the United States. So if you think about steel, glass, the largest food processing plant in the world, Central Foundry over in Defiance for General Motors, you know, Sauer Manufacturing, which is pretty much the largest pre-manufactured furniture maker in the world. I go down the entire list of things that are made in my district, and it affects the entire spectrum of what we do. And so that's why I get out, because I cannot do my job if I'm not out. And I've got to hear and listen to people. And in fact, we just came from a meeting a little bit ago with other priorities that people have out there. But some of the things, especially being the ranker on telecommunications, let me kind of run over some things, especially what's happened in the last since COVID hit. Rural broadband development. Just out of curiosity, everybody have broadband in here? Just, there's no questions on this, just raise your hand. But the reason I ask that is it's important, because we just came out of COVID, you know, we were coming out of COVID and what we saw happen right off the bat. You know, again, when you take healthcare and telecommunications together, it's an interesting mix, but it does work together. When COVID hit, almost about 3 weeks before, I can still remember, I was in some meetings where people were telling me that telehealth would never work. Telehealth would never work. 3 weeks after COVID was in its full tilt, I had people telling me if we didn't have telehealth, we'd be sunk. And to give you an idea, I had one of our federal communications commissioners out in the district. I've had him out several times over the years, and on this occasion we were at a place in Perrysburg. And they'd only done about 450 telehealth over the length of time that they had started. But by the time that we were there with the commissioner, and he and I both said the same words at the exact same time, we had to ask this question. Would you repeat what you just said? They had done 16,000 in a short period of time. But one of the things that makes it important is that in the United States, we have to have the right framework, especially on the broadband side, on the telecommunications side, because we had about $1.8 trillion of private investment out there across the country to make sure we had the broadband in place that we had. Now, Europe did not have the same situation that we had. They were actually having to cut speeds and raise costs. What happened in the United States, we increased speeds and cut costs. But that was because of what happened out there with the privates and also having the right laws on the books for them. When you think about everything that happened with, from telehealth for kids going to school to businesses having to operate, it was a major factor that also has made a quick change in the United States and also across the world. And I can still remember I was speaking to a conference of about 200 to 300 people about 2 months in. And the last question that somebody asked was kind of an interesting one. They said, do you think we're ever going to get back to normal? And I asked this question. I said, before I answer the question, what's normal going to be in the future? Here we are, we got people from all 50 states on one conference. We're all working from our offices or at home, and we're all getting something done. So it's actually changed the dynamics out there, how we're going to perceive things, do things into the future. Because, and also, you look around Washington, some of the major metropolitan areas, companies are now thinking over their entire strategy as to where they're going to have their people and where their business locations are going to be held. So do they need the bricks and mortars at where they have to have? So they've got people all over. So broadband is so important. But also, when you think about broadband in the rural areas, because I'm one of the co-chairs of the Rural Broadband Caucus. And, people say, do people actually get along in Washington? And I said, broadband is not a political issue. It affects Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike. And a friend of mine, who was also one of the rural broadband co-chairs, was from Iowa, who's a Democrat. And I can still remember in a meeting in Washington, and a reporter asked, how are you guys getting along since everybody's not getting along right now? And I said, it's real easy. I can get along with him simple. He's from Iowa. He comes from a state with 4 letters with 3 vowels, just like me. So I said, how can you not like a guy like that? So, there's so many issues that you can work on, but sometimes it comes down to this. With some of my Democrat friends, I said, you know what? When reporters ask us this, I said, you think about it. We find things that we can work on, and let's get it done. And I said, the other 95% of the time, we're going to cancel each other's votes out. But there's a lot of things that we work on that's so important. But broadband is important because we got to get it right, because again, when you think about our rural areas where we don't have it, we have truly unserved areas across this country. And is anybody here who works for Yellow Pages? Okay, I can say this then. When was the last time anybody in this room looked into the Yellow Pages? Anybody even remember? Okay, so what happens is you're going online and what? You're Googling. You're doing a search engine. Now, if you're in a rural area that does not have rural broadband and you're struggling, how are they going to find you? You might have the greatest piece of idea for, name a widget out there, but it's never going to happen because they can't find you. You can't communicate. So we want to make sure that we get broadband across this country, and that's one of the things I've been working with. And then again, we're going to have an oversight hearing on Wednesday, and that's broadband's going to come up. Because again, the other area that I've had to work on with the Federal Communications Commission is this. We've got to make sure that our maps out there are accurate. Several years ago, we were asked to look at the maps across the country, and they showed, I was looking at a map of Ohio, and I went, I had the chairman's name, or chairman's telephone number on speed dial, and I called him and said, these maps aren't right. He said, you got my entire district showing that everybody can get broadband. I said, that's impossible. I know it for a fact. It's not correct. So we had to go in and we crafted the legislation to make sure we had a Broadband Data Act out there, that we made sure that we have the FCC going out producing accurate maps, because again, what's just been passed, in the last year, we're going to spend over $58 billion on development out there. But we want to make sure that we get the unserved areas in there first, because I know I was on a call, a Zoom with the vice president, because they had the rankers of the telecoms on. And one of the early provisions that the administration was coming out with was they were saying that if you didn't have a certain speed at home or at work, they were going to classify you as unserved. But the problem with that was you take 58% of American families today and classify them as unserved. So we didn't want the build out to be starting in the metropolitan suburbs area when we needed to get it out. So a lot of that, and everybody understands that the directive is, if you don't have it, we got to get to you first and get out there and get it done. Another area that I've been working on is on the cybersecurity side. Cyber is, again, on the energy side, the telecommunications side. When you think of all these areas, we're being attacked 1 million times a day. And when you think on the cyber side, what happened to Colonial Pipeline in the past year, it's critical. We know that there's bad forces out there and governments that are working day and night to try to get into our systems to shut us down. to shut us down. And if this happens, just think about, take this scenario. This is my doomsday scenario. Suppose they can get in there in a major metropolitan on the East Coast or West Coast and be able to shut down an entire area, section of the country. Do it in the middle of the summertime, no air conditioning, trap tens of thousands of people on elevators, all food starting to rot within 2 to 3 days, and picture that in your mind. So cybersecurity is one of the things that, in fact, another conversation I had in the last day, it was this. We've got to make sure that what we know on the federal side is being communicated out to all of those that are out in these areas, because if we don't, we're in trouble. I had legislation that finally got signed into law. I worked on it with a Democrat friend of mine from California that is called CyberSense. We want to make sure on the bulk side on the grid that if you're putting in different pieces of equipment that it is secure, it's safe. You don't have to go out and test it. It's already been tested. We know what happened with rip and replace. If you heard about that with Huawei, we went out into our telecommunications system and have to rip out all of their equipment, billions of dollars. So we've got to make sure that it's right the first time. We can't get this thing wrong. My friend from California that I worked on the legislation with him on was also making sure we upgrade the grid. If we don't have a grid out there that's working, we're in trouble. Because picture this. Do we need more power today or less power? And we're in a situation we need more power. I don't care what anybody says out there, because think of this. I can go back, my mom grew up on a farm in Putnam County, and my mom was 13, I believe, when they finally got electricity on the farm. There were 7 kids in the family. And I can still, to this day, my grandparents died in 86 and 89, I can write down on a piece of paper, I think, every electrical appliance they had in their house. Everyone. But today, we have more and more coming in that we have to have, and then throw in electric vehicles. And I don't care what anybody says that some of the hearings we've had, that's only going to increase our electrical needs by about 1% to 2%. I find that hard to believe. So we have to make sure we have a grid out there that can produce the energy and get it to you, into our companies out there, ASAP, when we need it. So the last thing I'm going to touch on real quick about what I've been working on is on autonomous vehicles. Several years ago, I was approached about taking up the banner on AVs and where we have to do with it. I don't think last night during the Super Bowl game, and unfortunately the Bengals lost, that I didn't see any commercials that really with certain car companies, but pretty much right now, a lot of cars right now are what we call level 2. So that means that, stay in the lane, the braking and self-parking and things like this. So a lot of people don't realize that we go up these steps. We're already getting to certain spots already. But we have to get out there and get this thing done for a variety of reasons. First of all, it's just on the whole issue of making sure that people are safe. We're seeing a bad trend that more people are dying on the highways. We had over 37,000 people die in this past year on the roads. 94% of all the accidents that occur today are not because of the automobile or the truck, it's driver error. And I ride every year with the Highway Patrol. And it's when you're going down the road and the trooper says there's somebody, texting and whatever, write down, watching these people, that we've got a problem out there when you think about what we have to be doing out there on AVs. But what we want to make sure with AVs is this. First of all, we want to make sure that the vehicle is as safe as or safer than anything that's on the road today. That's one of the top things we have to do. We want to make sure that there's a federal preemption. Why is that? Well, it's just like with automobiles today. We can't have 50 states in the District of Columbia out there coming up with their own idea what they're going to do. You don't want to have an AV vehicle that you're driving toward Michigan. It's going to say within 5 minutes you're going to take over the vehicle's control because it's going to shut off because it can't cross a state line. So we got to make sure that these things can go, east to west, north and south. So we have to make sure there's federal preemption. Cybersecurity is absolutely essential. We have to make sure that everything that goes in to that vehicle is cyber secure. And I can't tell you how many different meetings I've had through the years on this. And we also have the research center outside of Columbus, the TRC, which I'm not sure if anybody's ever been down there. It's pretty much the only class of itself in the United States and maybe in the world where testing is done. But, cyber is being done down there, AV's being down there. The other area that we want to make sure is that there's privacy. We don't want the car telling, where you've been, what you've done, whatever, et cetera. So we got to have some privacy out there with the vehicle can transmit back. The other thing, especially when you think about during COVID, where these vehicles could really be helpful. Number one, for people that have a disability. When I was chairing the subcommittee back in the 115th Congress, that's about 4 years ago now, that when we were getting the bill out, my subcommittee vice chair, he had an adult son that had a disability. If he or his wife were not home on any given day, their son could not get to work. Now, if you had an AV, he could go to work every day with a vehicle. Senior citizens also need to have AV because, at a certain point in time, you don't ever want to think about when you can't drive anymore, but you don't want to become immobile, that we want to make sure that people can get out there and still have that mobility. So it's important that we get this thing done. We had over 300 staff meetings alone on this bill. I can't tell you how many meetings I had with the industry, not only in Washington, but across Ohio and across the nation on this legislation. And when you can get a piece of legislation out of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and I tell you, we have our fights back and forth, 54-0, because I worked with the Democrats. I said, what do you have to have, and how can we work this thing through to make sure that the legislation gets done? It's that important that we got the bill out, and not only did we get it out of committee unanimously, but on the House floor, I couldn't believe it when nobody wanted to even have a vote. We voiced it. But it went over in the Senate, and I won't get into the issue about the trial attorneys, but that's where it died. So I've been working on trying to get this bill back up because, again, we cannot have China, Japan, or some European country developing the technology that we should be developing here. Because people, again, especially with Chinese technology, after Huawei and anything that's coming out of there now, we have to be extremely careful that we're not putting that into our vehicles, because people don't want to think that the car is going to go flying off a cliff. So we want people out there to make sure that they know what they're doing when they're getting behind the wheel. Also, again, having been president of our club and everything else, I don't want to get political, so I'm just going to keep it. I don't remember one time I got done with a meeting, I got chastised by somebody at a club. And I explained to him, I said, no, you don't understand. I can't be political at a Rotary or Kiwanis, so I try to stay up here. So if you want to ask questions, political, that's fine. But let me just go down some of the issues that we're really facing right now in the country. Number one, inflation, number one issue across the country. When I go across my district right now, the number one issue, and across the country, is only one thing. We can't find people to work. And has anybody heard the word minimum wage mentioned lately? Anybody. And the reason of that is that firms are out there paying at a level now they never would have dreamed of. They can't believe it. But with everything they're trying to do to get somebody in the door. I was going in my district and I passed a fast food restaurant last summer, and the next day I was back in that same town, but I had to double check if I hadn't read the sign wrong. It said this on the marquee out front: help wanted, daily pay. Daily pay. They'll do anything to get you in the door. But when you think about on the inflationary front, this is kind of scary because we're at a 40-year high of 7.5%. So wages are going up there. Everybody's watching everything going up, but you have to think about everything where we're going to be. Because especially with energy costs are going up, when you think about 50% on gasoline, about 40% on diesel, 82.5% of everything that comes in the state of Ohio is trucked. So everything that we do is going to go up in cost. So everything's going to be passed on to the consumer. And so one of the number one issue I hear from anybody out there is that what prices are. When you look at new car prices, they're up 12%, if you can find a new car, because of the chip shortage, 12%. You got used cars and trucks up 37%, utilities up 25%. So all these things are really making a hit out there in what we're doing, and the number one reason for the inflation right now is federal spending. And when you're at federal spending like what you've seen, that it's going to push things up. And so we've got to get this thing back. I've pushed a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. Years ago, I was on the budget committee. We've got to get there because, again, when you pass the $30 trillion threshold being in debt, $30 trillion, who's going to pay it back? How are you going to pay it back? The other thing I try to look at every morning when I get up, before I leave the house, I try to find out what the 10-year treasury is. Anybody know what the 10-year treasury was today? Because I didn't get a chance because I had to leave the house early. It was over two last week. And so when that treasury keeps going up, this is kind of the question that was asked to President Obama several years back. What happens if we're in a treasury sale and we don't sell everything? Can you imagine if we went out to a treasury sale and we didn't sell? The market would crash. And what the president then at that time said, well, what we're going to have to do is just keep raising the rate. Well, go back to Jimmy Carter, and I don't want to consider myself that old, but when you think of it, we had 21.5% interest rates. When I was working down the street here, practicing law, we were writing land contracts. Why? Because you can go to a bank and get a loan. So our seller that was praying that the buyer within 3 years on that balloon would pay them back because they couldn't get a bank loan because of 21.5% interest rates. I remember one of the savings and loan in Bowling Green, you could get a money market for over 14%. It was great if you weren't buying anything, but it's devastating to business. So when you think about that, we could be, when we watch that we're looking at the interest rates going up. We had a Fed official last week saying that they're going to have to drastically maybe go up another point in the next 6 months. Think what that's going to do. Now, the other thing you have to think about, because when I was on the budget committee, I would always ask this question: where are we going to be in 10 years? Tell me what the interest, how much interest are we going to be paying every 10 years? And so one of the things about the Congressional Budget Office, if you ever look at their scores, it's pretty much I call it pretty static, because it's almost looking like in a shoebox. They can't look outside of it. So they're not looking to see how much things could happen. They're only looking at existing law and what's in there right now today. We could be this is hard to believe. When they always say that your kids and your grandkids are going to pay for this? Wrong, you are. 2031, the latest number was that, and this is no number, this is July of last year, we'll be paying $210 billion just to pay interest on the debt. The getting really close scenario, we'll be paying $1 trillion a year to pay interest on the debt. I have a question for y'all. How are you going to pay that? How are we going to do it? I haven't got a clue. When people tell me, well, we're going to be as worse as Greece, we could ever get in this mess like we're in right now. $1 trillion a year, unbelievable. The other thing is, when you think about the inflationary thing that we have to, and you think about what's happening across the world right now, is on energy. And again, I'm on the energy, the Energy and Commerce Committee. I'm also on the Energy Subcommittee. We've got to make sure that we don't get back to where we were. Years ago, we had moratorium zones that you couldn't, in a town, that you could not get natural gas because there was no natural gas, because they told us what? We had no natural gas. And what we've seen happen, I know I went up, it was like a 2-day up and back with the freshman members on the House, Republican House side, about 2008, to Alaska. And this is what we're being told at that time. We believe we believe this can happen. Well, what happened is that American technology and ingenuity and having the right regs in place and laws, that today we can outproduce Saudi Arabia and Russia in oil production. We were told we had no natural gas. What have we become? The #1 natural gas producer in the world. #1. That doesn't happen by accident. But we have to make sure that we have the pipelines in place to be able to move the product. And we have to make sure that we have the laws in place to be able to do it. Why? Because you don't want to be dependent on somebody else. Let's think back what happened. And this is just all fact. On the president's first day that he came into office, what did he do? He killed the Keystone XL. Keystone XL is 840,000 barrels of oil coming to the United States every day. The United States uses about 18.5 to 19 million barrels of oil a day. By killing the Keystone XL at 840,000 barrels of oil a day, sent a signal. What's going to happen? Well, not long after that, then the president said he'd take the sanctions off of Nord Stream 2. Nord Stream 2 was a natural gas line coming in from Russia into Europe, Now, when I've been in Central and Eastern Europe, you know what they all tell me? They all want American gas. Why? They don't want Russian. Why? Because the Russians will cut you off in the middle of the winter. This is how it works. Because they'll do it because they'll say, no, we're going to up the ante on you. And so they all say that the United States is a friend, and they're not going to do that to us. The other issue you might have right here in our own backyard, Line 5. Line 5 is a line that comes in from Canada through the Upper Peninsula, down through the Lower Peninsula, and then feeds also our refineries here in northern Ohio. That's over about 530,000 barrels of product that come through there every day. If we don't have Line 5, that's $5 billion of economic impact in our region alone. $5 billion. Now, if you got rid of Line 5, do you know how many trucks you have to transport that amount of product into our area? 2,200 a day. 2,200 a day. Now I'm going to give you another little bad statistic. You know how many truck drivers we're short in the country? 80,000. And you know what the other problem we have today? You can't buy a truck. It's a chip shortage. So we've got a real issue that, and I led a letter to the president saying that we got, especially on Line 5, we had to make sure Line 5 was still in operation, because if we lose Line 5, we're in trouble. And a couple of days later, the administration started backing off, saying that they would only have the Corps of Engineers start doing their pretty much what they call their environmental impact study. Because what they want to do up there, of course, is instead of having the trench, they'll tunnel under the lake and put the tunnel in for the line then. But the longer we wait, the much longer it's going to take to get it done. So it's important that we think about what's happening on energy, because again, one of the things that we don't get credit for in this country is from 2005 to 2020, that 15-year period, we had about a 20% reduction in emissions across our country. We led the world. Go find out what happened in China. Go find out what happened in India. It went up, not down. So we're leading in the world. So that's one of the things that we always have to make sure that we always let people know is what we're doing in this country. And then one of the other things is I've always been a supporter is what we call an all-of-the-above energy strategy. If you want clean power today, you know what it is? If you want zero emissions, it's nuclear. And when the rest of the world, look what France has just come out and said, they're building. And then what the French and the Swedes and the Japanese do, they're reprocessing their rods. We're not doing it in the United States. We have Yucca Mountain, we spend your taxpayer dollars out there, pretty much you can say, and utility dollars to put in about $18 billion hole. It's the most expensive hole I've ever seen in my life. But the problem is that was supposed to be the repository for not only for commercial but also military grade nuclear waste. But why not reprocess it? Because you know what we're doing today, we're storing on site. Every nuclear facility is being stored on site. It's ridiculous. We need to get out there. And I'm also looking at different types of nuclear reactors, small reactors. You don't have to have large. You could actually have a small reactor to run like a large corporate area. Period. We're not doing it. But those are things that we got to be looking at into the future. So it's one of the issues down in D.C. You never have to worry about what you're going to be doing when you wake up in the morning. See, if anybody tells me they're bored, they're not getting up in the morning. But the other issue that we were really concerned with in committee, and every American should be concerned with, is on the opioid crisis and the drug crisis we have in this country. It was back when we did H.R. 6 several Congresses ago. We had over 60 bills, Republican and Democrat, placed in H.R. 6 in our committee to make sure that we were doing something about the drug crisis here, because we'd hit about 73,000 deaths. And we want to make sure that we did everything possibly could to reduce people's reliance on opioids and other types of drugs, because what we see is people got hooked on opioids, and 40% of the people that were being hooked on opioids were being hooked by, not because they were being prescribed it, they're going to Grandma and Grandpa's house or Aunt Jane's house and they're getting in their medicine cabinet and stealing it. So over 40% of the people out there, were getting the drugs from those sources. But then all of a sudden we also know is that people that after they were prescribed it, they couldn't get them anymore. What did they do? They went to heroin. And the heroin traffic, and when you think of the cocaine traffic in this country and everything else, has just gone, it hasn't been a gradual, it's gone straight up. So one of the things that, when I've gone to different hospitals in my district to try to get people, when you think about like opioids, what are you going to do? One of the things is that, well, you might not prescribe them. You would give people blister packs. Instead of saying you get a whole bottle of pills, you're going to get maybe 3 pills to take. I was at one hospital that they've started a new program that before you go in for surgery, they sit down with you and say, okay, you're going to have surgery X. And now this is what's going to happen, and this is how you're going to feel when you wake up. You're not going to feel great, and we're going to have to work you through this because you're not going to get what you thought to kill whatever. And so, we've got to do something. And I'll never forget, we were in a committee hearing several years ago, and I remember asking one of the panelists, I said, let me ask this question. How come we don't hear about this around the world? And the guy said, we just overprescribe. So what's happened, though, in this country is that we've gone from around 73,000 deaths. We saw it going down a little bit. Now with the when we had the COVID crisis and people at home, we had over 101,000 people die in this country from overdoses. And the number one drug out there that's killing you is fentanyl. And fentanyl is coming from where? China. Now, fentanyl, if you're not familiar with this drug, I'm telling you, if you think about a flake of it as small as you can get, will kill you. The Border Patrol interdicted, and this is all, because I was down at the border last year in May, 40% of our Border Patrol was offline at that time because they're doing what? They're processing paper for the 2 million people that crossed the border. So we have 40% of the people offline, and at the same time, what happens? Well, the drugs are flowing in, but of the fentanyl that they did interdict, it was 11,200 pounds, and that's enough to kill every American 7 times over. So this stuff, we don't know how much even got into the country that didn't get stopped by the Border Patrol. So we've got this whole issue on the border with drugs and what we're going to have to do about it, but we've got to stop this flow. And, one of the things is we got to stop people from wanting to use it is the best way to stop it. But the other way is at the same time, we got to stop it from coming into the country. So it's an issue out there that concerns me and a lot of others. And at the same time, I don't understand this. You probably read this too. Why would the Justice Department, when we're having a massive opioid crisis, 101,000 people dying and it's going down, want to promote safe injection sites? I don't get it. Or crack pipes. I don't get it. That's your federal government. So, it's unbelievable because, again, when you think of the 101,000 people that have died, for people between the ages of 18 and 45, is the number one cause of death now is fentanyl, or is our overdoses. Fentanyl is one of the leading causes of deaths now in the United States, and it's also right. You're seeing the your age going down in this country is because of drug usage in the country. I know when I was president, I know what a hard stop is, so I'm going to get there. Let me, if I could, let me close on this. Ukraine. Those people are our friends. I've been there. They are our friends. When I was there several years ago, that's when the Russians were sending in people to attack their eastern border. And we're about a 5-hour drive from where that was going on. We all know what the Russians did. They grabbed the Crimea. What the Ukrainians are saying is, look, what the Russians also want to do, they want to come across the entire southern coast of the country and take it over. Why? If you stop anything from coming in from the Black Sea, that means all shipments of any type of energy will be stopped. So who do they become dependent on? The Russians. And I'm telling you, it's scary because, again, there has not been any war in Europe since World War II. And I think most people thought that it could not happen. But, the question is, what does Putin want to get out of this? Well, if he can make all of Europe dependent, except the French, because they're, pretty much gone nuclear. But if you make everybody have to buy Russian energy to run your companies and to heat your homes with them, you're totally dependent on. Also, if you remember, the Ukraine is pretty much like a breadbasket for Europe. So by grabbing the Ukraine, what do you get? all the farm ground. So you got that. But, you know, some of the numbers, and this is, I'm not going to tell you anything you can't find online. Has anybody ever gone to the CIA website? They actually have one. It's hard to believe. But they've got a lot of good statistics, and these are the things I can quote. But when you look at the, where the Russians are out there, if you go back to 2020, and again, this is why oil and natural gas is so important to the Russians, and this is their number one thing they've got to be out there selling, because this is how they run their economy. In 2020, it was about 28% of their GDP was coming from oil and natural gas. Before things had gone down a little bit, and before the United States went out there, because guess who they hate? The United States. And let me tell you something else. What the Russians will do, they'll go fund groups in your country, ask the Europeans to kill whatever they don't want happening. It had been up to 40% of their dollars coming in was from oil and natural gas, and it dropped down to 28%. In the United States, according to the American Petroleum Institute, you know, the United States, when you think about oil and natural gas, it's only 8% of our GDP. But the Russians are totally dependent on this. This is the only way they survive. So when you think about their exports, and here's another thing. Remember what I said that, you know, what we in this country that we use over 18 million barrels of oil a day. So if you think about the 18, 19, depending on whatever day it is, the Russians will import only 76,200 barrels of oil a day. And this is back in 2015. Their exports at that time were 4.92 million. And when you think of what they have in total natural gas reserves and everything else, you know, natural gas right now they're number 2. But when you look at proven reserve, they have 47.8 trillion. When it comes to natural gas, and when you look at cubic meters. So when people ask why, it's all about one thing. It's about energy, it's about money, it's about grabbing a neighbor, and if they take them, who's next? The Poles? You know, pick a country, who's next? And so this is a critical situation over there that, you know, it's got a lot of people concerned about. And also we're our enemies, and again, they're not our friends, that, you know, hear about when one of our not close friends out there launched a hypersonic missile. If you know what a hypersonic is this. It doesn't go up, it's almost like a cruise missile. And the problem is if our early warning systems can't pick it up on the ground until it's on top of you, and it's too late. So then they're saying, well, don't worry about it, that, you know, satellites will be able to pick this stuff up. Well, the problem with that is if they haven't got a killer satellite up, they're killing your satellites. So, you know, all these things can be timed. And, you know, when you think about chips, there are chip shortage out there and what's going on around the world. You know, Taiwan is a huge chip maker. Fortunately, Ohio is going to be making chips with Intel. But we only make 13% of the chips out there today. And we were way up there until we are where we are today. And so we got to change this. But if Taiwan falls and the communist Chinese grab it, that's a major chip maker, and what's going to happen to our chips? In another area. So now that I've given you indigestion after lunch, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm sorry I went over. If somebody's got, I'll stay if anybody's got any questions, but I really appreciate it. I appreciate what you all do. I tell you, the job I have, it's the greatest job on earth. You know, to represent over 736,000 people here in Ohio. But if you ever have any questions, comments, concerns, or whatever, please contact us. I got the Bowling Green office, and I got, well, I'm not sure where the other offices might be in the future. I gotta know where my map is. But at the same time, if anybody has anything, please feel free anytime to contact me. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, you gave us a lot of food for thought, that's for sure. And we hope that you figure out your redistricting really soon. So as a thank you, we'd like to give you this book that was written by one of our past presidents, Clint Mogg, Historical Tales of Toledo. And we also will be making a donation in your name to the Polio Plus Foundation.
appreciate it.
So
Thanks very
thank you.
much. Thank
If,
you.
For sake of time, if any of you want to stick around to ask Congressman Latta any questions, feel free to do so. For those of you on Zoom, if you want to get some questions to Matt, maybe he could respond things or relay things back to you then. Today, we have one meeting. It's a membership meeting, and we'll be meeting in the boardroom just down the hallway here.